I'm very pleased to welcome Charlene Little, who's an independent equine nutritionist for our third webinar tonight. And Charlene has a master's degree in equine science from the Royal Dick Vet School in Edinburgh. And she's passionate about improving horse welfare and performance through educating and empowering us as the owners of the horses. So she uses nutritional management strategies that are unbiased because we're not connected to a feed company, which is fabulous. Although I nearly died, I grabbed this notepad. It probably isn't going to be back to front, but my notepad is a certain feed company and I don't even use that feed, but that's my notepad for tonight. Charlene's going to discuss how to approach our horses' nutritional requirements through the competition season, which is something really I kind of just throw in the nuts pretty much all year round, and it's the same nuts all year round. So this is going to be enlightening for me. And she's also going to focus on optimal feeding for muscle development and performance. So I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you very much, Charlene. I will now make you host.
Oh God, that's the most stressful part.
And if anybody has any questions, you can either save them up for the end and you can unmute yourself, or you can put them into the chat box and then Charlene will see those at the end. So Charlene, make host. Do you want to change the host to Charlene Little? Yes, that should be you.
Super, thank you.
And I'll unmute myself.
No problem. Hi. So if I share my screen, hopefully everyone can see that. Is that, can I just check, Lisa, before I go any further, is that coming up okay? Because my tech abilities, I always worry about. The rest of me is okay, but tech sometimes. Perfect, thanks, Lisa. Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. I just want to start off by saying a massive thank you to Lisa, actually, for the invitation to speak to you all. And yes, this evening we're going to look at feeding for peak performance. I thought I would briefly give a little bit of background because I know there's not many independent equine nutritionists, although Lisa probably said it better than I could about myself, just as a way of an introduction. So back in 2011, actually, I first started out with a master's degree from the University of St Andrews in chemistry. And at that time, I was really focusing on analytical physical chemistry and, you know, use of chemicals rather than sort of the theory behind it. I then went on and worked for a while in Canada before returning back here, where I worked for the Department of Agriculture. And I still do work for them, where I ran some of the chemistry and microbiology programs, sort of focusing on sort of the environment and the agriculture sector. So that you're looking at grasslands and that type of things. So I've always had a sort of an interest, obviously, in the environmental and the forage aspect and sort of the agri sector. And then in 2018, I commenced another master's, as Lisa said, with Edinburgh on equine science. And whenever I was finishing that within my dissertation, I decided to focus in on equine nutrition. And hopefully some of you may have actually participated in my survey that I did on equine joint supplements. And it was a really good piece of research that went forward, and I'm really pleased, like this is hot off the press, pleased to say that my abstract has actually been accepted for presentation at the European Society of Veterinary and Comparative Nutrition Conference, which is being held this year in Dublin and Belfast for the first time. So it's really, really nice to see a bit of local research going and being accepted at the veterinary conference. It's a European-wide one. Normally they look more at ruminants and sort of cattle nutrition and that sort of thing. So nice to have something equine related and local from the area. So keep an eye out if anyone is at any of those conferences this year. Have we look out for my poster. But yes, so aside from my research, I'm really keen at combining sort of the academic aspect with the hands-on experience, just to provide people with useful information that really doesn't give the pitch on you need to feed lots of X, Y, or Z, but really just feeding for welfare and to ensure that you're getting the most from your horse. So this evening then, I thought, I know it sounds like, oh, we're going to feed for performance, but really, I thought we would first of all take a look at the basics and understanding them first and foremost, because there's no point in looking at anything in particular unless you have sort of the basic groundwork there first. And then once we have a quick run through those, then I'll talk you through sort of the way that I would create a feeding plan or nutrition plan and some of the ways to make that work for yourself. And sort of how to tailor that for the likes of competition season, you know, when you may be away from home more than you normally would be, or you have overnight stays taken, or how to minimize stress and sort of any sort of ulcer prone issues or that sort of thing. So that was sort of, hopefully we've enough time, how I planned the evening, and we'll see how it goes. So really straight into the basics then, right back to your pony club days. What does a horse need to prosper in the wild? That's basically where we start, because that tells you how the system works, and how to, you know, basically make sure that it's working optimal. So there's obviously the 3 F's: freedom, friends, and forage, or food. And tonight we're just going to focus on the feed aspect. Really, first, you know, no brainer, every horse needs access to clean, fresh drinking water. It's worth remembering that the amount that they need does greatly vary from day to day, you know, if there's hot weather, if they've had exercise. So don't assume that if 3 buckets does them one day, that they'll only need 3 buckets the next day, that sort of thing. So just bear that in mind to start off with. And the other thing that we know from the wild is that horses are trickle feeders, and that's how they're designed to be. So they're developed to eat sort of almost continuously for large amounts of the day and the night. And in the wild, it's usually a high fiber, low energy forage, which is actually very, very different from our grassland here, which isn't sort of a native type of grassland here in Ireland or the UK. And actually it has usually much higher energy value. So that sometimes does mean why we get issues such as obesity or metabolic problems, or well, how it's one of the reasons why they can be exasperated is because of our cultivated grasses. However, we still have to remember that a horse needs a lot of fiber to maintain their digestive integrity. So the answer isn't simply to cut the amount of forage or the amount of grass. And sort of the gold standard at the moment is around 2% dry weight, body weight, dry matter of body weight fiber per day. Obviously it can be down to sometimes 1.5 if you're trying to cut calories as well, but in around that 1.5 to 2%. And then alongside that, we also need to think about the constant source of fiber to maintain the digestive integrity. So it's not just about the amount, it's also around the timings. And that's really important because they are trickle feeders. A horse constantly has stomach acid constantly being pumped into their stomach, even if no food is being ingested. So therefore, in order to ensure that that system doesn't become too acidic, we don't end up with ulcers, things like that. It's really important to sort of keep in your head that you don't want your horse to go more than 4 hours normally without forage at a time, just to maintain that sort of pH within the stomach. And then finally, we need to consider the energy source, especially if we're feeding a concentrate alongside our forages. So most of us will know forage is the main source of energy, but if it isn't sufficient, we top it up with our concentrates or a meal, and ensure that that doesn't come too concentrated. Often we're talking here in terms of sugar and starch. We have to ensure that we do that in small proportions as well, not there stops to spill over into the hindgut, and things like hindgut acidosis and stuff like that. So those are the basics. I'm pretty sure most people will know all of that, but I thought I would run through it before we go any further, and we will touch again on sort of those basics and how they come in. We're thinking about our feed plan. So the next thing, I know I'm basically giving you all a biology lesson here this evening. Sorry, nobody wants to hear these things, but I always like to think about and just touch on an overview of what horses need to get from their forage and from their concentrates. So basically we're thinking about nutrients or compounds, the compounds that food are broken down into, we basically collectively call nutrients. And nutrients are what are required by the body to survive. And different foods, whether it's different types of forage, hard feed, or etc., will all have different compositions of nutrients. And it is important to remember that, you know, all of these nutrients have different functions in the body. Some will have more than one. And each of the types of food will have different compositions of these nutrients as well. So we're talking here about our energy sources, which we're thinking about our carbohydrates, which most people will know that's coming from your forages mostly, and your oils and fats. Although it's also worth remembering, you know, some of these have more than one function. But I'm just talking sort of at a high level, your energy sources, carbohydrates, oils and fats. Then our proteins which provide the amino acids for our building blocks for our muscles, tendons, hormones, etc., are another composition within our feeds. These can also be an energy source, but they're very inefficient, and usually that's when the horse or a person either has no other source of energy that they start to break down proteins, water obviously, and then vitamins and minerals. So we both have inorganic and organic vitamins and minerals, and all of these are required in different quantities for our horses, and they do depend also on workload and temperament. So they are quite individual at times to your own horse. So it's worth remembering sort of all those main types of nutrients when you're thinking about your feed ration. So we are thinking about obviously those sources. There's no point me saying you need to think about your carbohydrates, your proteins, your oils and fats without saying, well, what is the composition then of the different feeds and different forages of these nutrients that you've told me I have to think about. So I thought I would run through as well quickly the relative comparisons and generalizations. So I'm using they are generalizations here because you'll know yourselves that there is large variations both within forages and within energy contents, for example. And also you could buy one feed that's really high in sugar and starch, and another feed that's really low in it. So we're talking in generalities here. The one thing I would say is people start reading your labels. Really start getting to know what the labels say or what they don't say. And sometimes that can be as revealing as anything. You can consider things like testing your hay or your haylage. There's a really good place over in England that will do it for, I think, about £40. So if you had, you know, your winter's hay, you could take your sample and have it your whole winter for 40 quid, know exactly how much energy is needed. So it's not that you're thinking really crazy expense here. And it just sort of is another little bow or feather to your bow whenever you're thinking about making your plans. So there is. So your types of feed. So the first one to start off with obviously is your forage. Forage is your main source of nutrients and energy. It may even be your only source of nutrients and energy. So it is, you know, really the starting point that I take for everything is your forage. It contains water, it has proteins, fats, minerals, vitamins. It's obviously high in fiber, relatively low in starch and sugar. Obviously, I did say earlier that our grasslands here in the UK and Ireland are a little bit well, cultivated, so have been cultivated to actually be higher in sugar and starches, but compared to hard feeds or concentrates, they're still normally lower. And really what you choose to use, whether it's hay, haylage or grass, will all sort of be slightly different, but of the same ilk. You know, obviously they're all coming from grass. So that is the ground source, or the first thing that I always look to whenever I'm making a plan is, right, do I have access to grass? If I do, what type of grass is it? Is it particularly, has it had a lot of fertilizer on it? Is it particularly well growing? Is it sort of harder, older grass, maybe from old bog land and that sort of thing? Then, you know, if I'm using hay or haylage, I'll be thinking about, you know, is it a good quality type of hay? Is there dust? Is there any mold? Things like that I don't want to see. And then the same with your haylage as well. So it's just taken into mind, you know, that's your main source of energy. So you do want to spend a bit of time being fussy and picking and, you know, actually planning what you have and what you have access to. And if you know that you're going to be doing a lot of competition, that sort of thing, you might want to say, right, the majority of the time they're at home, they're on grass, but I'll also keep them on some hay so that I know that when I have to stable them overnight or stable them away for 2 days, I haven't given them a massive shock to the system as I'm about to go and ride for Dublin or whatever by moving them from grass to hay. Some horses might be fine on it, others may not be. So it just comes down to your individuality, but it's also that plan, having that plan in place as well. And so the next sort of type of concentrates or feed sources are concentrates. These are usually your types of grains, cereals, and they'll contain your proteins, your minerals as well, depending on how they've been made up. So they're designed to basically add things like energy or protein to your diet, or vitamins and minerals. It's also worth saying that our forage will be deficient in some vitamin and minerals because it has been cultivated in certain ways. So there's no purely natural vegetation for horses really that, well, like unless you live in some 1,000-acre estate, which I'm going to assume nobody here is, and leave your horses running wild all the time. We're talking here in our competitive situation, and we have a certain amount of fields. We have grassland that has been cultivated for a long time now, and there is deficiencies. So you will probably be thinking about your balancers, even if you're feeding nothing else other than your forage, just to make up for those. And then a lot of our premixes as well are what I would call fortified feeds. So they will have vitamins and minerals already within them. So that's those. And I like to call sort of the miscellaneous. You have a few other options as well within that. So you have the likes of your oils and fats. These are really good low sugar starch options for adding calories because you're adding them via oils, and they're really calorie dense. Then you have other things like your legumes. So that's your alfalfa. So these are like an alternative source of fiber. And usually they would have a higher protein content than grass, and often actually are lower in sugar and starch, but maybe have a higher oil content, which actually gives them a relatively high energy content. A lot of alfalfas and stuff like that can actually be, a kilogram of them can be equal to the calorie count in, you know, a kilogram of a lot of our concentrated feeds as well. So it's worth remembering that if you needed to put extra fiber into your diet or extra weight, you don't necessarily have to go to the traditional concentrates. You could actually go down the fiber route if your horse was happy enough to eat sort of that as well. And then obviously we have our beet pulp, which is the fibrous material left over after sugar extracted from sugar beets. So it's, I always like to think, somewhere between that of grains and hay. So it's also another really good option that we have on our fingertips now. Hi, why is this not working? There we go. It's okay. So that is sort of a general comparison of our different feed sources and what's in them, just to get an idea. So when you're thinking about your plan for the year ahead, you sort of start off with the first step is, right, my forage, then what am I going to add into? And depending on which horse and your own needs, you'll be thinking, what sort of calories do I want? Or do I need calories at all? Maybe I don't, maybe I just want a balancer. So you start to think about these things. And what I thought I would touch on again as well, very, very quickly, is the digestive system and sort of how it works, so that just to rationalize why I'm telling you all these things. Just, you know, to reiterate about why it is important to think about meal sides, the trickle feeder aspect and everything. And really it's not just to badger on about the biology. Like, I want to make your feeding as efficient as possible. Horses are not cheap, so feeding is not cheap. So I want you to get the maximum benefits. So if you're feeding everything in one big large bulk or something like this, it's sort of running through the horse. So you're not getting maximum digestion in the right places and absorption. So you're possibly losing out on, you know, vitamin and mineral absorption where it should be, and even potentially causing problems in another area. You know, if you've fed too much sugar and starch in one go, it goes straight to the hindgut and you could end up with running manure or something like that. So it is, I'm not just badgering on for the crack. But the system, so if you think about it, it's over 100 feet long. It's huge. It's all crammed in there. So it is, and it can really be split into two parts. So you have the foregut, where the chemical and the enzymatic digestion takes place, and then the hindgut, which is where the microbial fermentation is. And really any part of it, it's a very delicate system. If it's compromised, can really affect the horse's ability to metabolize and absorb its foods correctly. So I like the split between the foregut and hindgut, because the way I think about it is the foregut, the food passes through relatively quickly. It's a relatively small area. So to maximize efficiency and reduce the potential for overload or things getting shunted through too quickly, this is why I think you need to feed small amounts, little and often, trickle feeders. This is why it's important. And it's really important then if you have a higher sugar and starch content, because all of that needs to be digested in the foregut, not in the hindgut, for efficiency and to stop other problems. It's also important when you're thinking about your stomach ulcers and things like that, not having an empty stomach for a long time. And then conversely, when things go to the hindgut, they can stay there, you know, for 48 hours, and they're broken down really slowly by the microbiome. And it's basically like a living organism within the horse's digestive tract. So what you put in there really influences the environment, and that also then will influence how efficient it works, how healthy it is, and how stable it is. So you just want to keep that environment also really as close to natural as possible. So then, you know, you're ensuring efficient use and harmony within the digestive system. So very quickly, and this is not, there's always, you know, I suppose a bit more nuance to these things, but at a high level, the foregut are where the sugar, starch and fats, our energy sources, are absorbed. And then the hindgut takes sort of the structural carbohydrates, the non-soluble ones, and ferments them down into our volatile fatty acids. And that is actually where we get, you know, up to 70 plus % total of our energy produced. So really important. So both the foregut and the hindgut will produce energy. But the foregut takes your sugars and starch and your fats and enzymatically degrades them down, whereas the hindgut, the wee microbiomes, you know, munch them all up, and then they produce volatile fatty acids, which are absorbed into the hindgut or into the bloodstream from there. And the majority of our vitamins are absorbed or enzymatically degraded in the foregut. However, the hindgut does actually, those microbiomes microbes actually do synthesize things like our vitamin Bs, which are then absorbed. So they also do produce some. And then most of our proteins that a horse is digested in the foregut as well. Although again, amino acids are synthesized by that microbiome, which are also absorbed. So you can see that microbiome is really important. It needs to be working really efficiently because it actually produces byproducts that are essential to the horse. And the foregut, which is really small and things can get pushed through really quickly, actually are where the majority of the ingested vitamins and minerals and proteins are taken. So you don't want things to move through that too quickly before they're broken down and absorbed. Okay, I'll stop with the biology now. So we'll move on now to actually creating a plan. So you have to basically keep all that in the back of your head whenever you're thinking about your plan for the year, and you're looking at so like we've taken all of the essential nutrients and we know basically what we need to be thinking about in terms of proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins and minerals. And then we need to pull this all together. So how does this work for your horse? How do we apply this to your horse? So my starting point is always assess your horse's body condition. Do you need to maintain weight, add weight, or lose weight? So that's your first. That tells you whether you need to be in a calorie deficit, surplus, or maintenance. Then we also will be thinking about your temperament of your horse. So is it a stressy type of horse? Is it a bit sparkly? Especially if it has a different type of forage, if you change it from hay to haylage, or you put it out to grass, does that change its temperament? Or if you use certain types of concentrates, does that change its temperament? Maybe you want to add more sparkle in. So you're thinking about this not necessarily from the, oh, I want to take stuff away. Some people want to add more in. And the other thing that is actually scientifically proven is that some horses, their temperament are naturally good doers or bad doers, and will require additional support no matter what their workload is. So that has actually been factored into ration plans now. So it's not just your horse. It's all horses. Some of them are, their temperament actually affects how much food they need. Then we have to think about the workload, obviously, you say, and how much exercise you're actually doing. So a lot of people will overestimate their workload. And also they'll be like, oh, well, I rode for an hour, but you need to be thinking, right, well, within that hour, did I walk for an hour? Did I trot for 20 minutes? Did I canter for 20 minutes? You know, how much realistically did you actually do in that hour? Did I sit on my phone and have a chat? So all of those, are things that we'd be thinking about whenever you're planning for your year ahead, say. And the one thing I would say is you are planning on, you're still feeding the horse that you have, so you don't feed for what your workload will be in 2 weeks' time. If your horse is at a maintenance weight and doesn't need to put weight on, that sort of thing, you just adjust as your program continues and increases, then you adjust your feed as the workload. So it's just really important to always remember that you come back and reassess. Now, adjustments literally could be maybe a little bit more concentrates or a little bit less concentrates. So that's the point that we want to get to, is you have a plan where the adjustments are minor and they're not going to upset the balance of the digestive system. You're not going to be introducing a brand new feed or a brand new supplement or something like that. And then I also like to think about sort of the specifics here in the workload. For example, my brood mare, you're thinking about additional protein and mineral requirements. Or if we were concentrating on muscle building, you want to be very aware of your protein requirements and ensuring that you have the best forms of protein for your horse's diet to support your hard work. Or if you have a horse that has any clinical issues that you need to manage, if you have any issues with ulcers and things like that. I suppose I don't really think about building a ration plan based on only building muscle, because if everything is working well, then the whole system is more efficient, and as long as you have the correct components in there, your muscle building will be more effective alongside the work that you're doing. And then the other thing that I like to think about is your environment. And that's coming back to, your access to grass and turnout, or is it a paddock turnout? Are you on hay, haylage all year round? And your plans for the year competitively. Will you be away a lot overnights? Or will you, do you have a horse that eats well whenever they are away? If not, what can you put in place to have sort of a support mechanism so that you can counteract that whenever you're away? And that might be having maybe small amounts of maybe grass nuts in the diet all the time, so that when you go away, you can easily increase that for a short period of time. So you haven't changed the diet because that was already within the diet. You just increased it for those couple of days. Your horse likes eating that, and then you can reduce that back down when you come back home. Things like that are just really useful little plans that I like to start thinking about now. And it's really about ensuring consistency of diet and making sure that there's minimal disruption and trying to maintain that healthy diet, healthy digestive tract. And the one thing I would say is this doesn't start, do not do this 1 week from Balmoral if you're going to Balmoral. You do this, a couple of months in preparation, so I don't want anybody coming away being like, I changed my horse's diet, I went to Balmoral and it went like crap. And I'm like, so please don't. You do this gradually, you have this plan in place. Like, I'd be saying to people, if you're going to Dublin, this would be a plan to put in place now. Start thinking about it. If you're going to Balmoral, wait until after Balmoral before you start changing things. That's my little caveat on this whole thing. So oh my god, I talk so much. So I wanted to run through like body condition scoring. I hope you are making a slow dinner, guys. And the first thing to start, so this is where I start. I do body condition scoring. This is the sort of thing where when you're doing your plan and when you're reviewing your plan, I like to do it every 2 weeks. And I'll often take photos on the side and from behind to help me gauge what the progress is. You can also use, if you have a weigh bridge, that'd be fantastic, but you can also use, the girth buckles, which hole are you in, or you can check your weigh tape for comparatives. It's not so good, as a weight, but it's good as a comparison, from week to week. And really that's where you start. If your horse is too thin, you need to put weight on it. If it's too fat, it needs to lose weight before you go any further with anything else. And that dictates whether you're in a calorie surplus or deficit, or you're in a maintenance. And then we also add in, and that's, you will know if you will work out if you're in a calorie deficit or surplus based on those other aspects. So your workload as well. So you're not just ignoring that. I put up the link there. That's the BHS. They do a really good fat scoring mechanism. That's something else I should say. It's whenever I talk about body condition scoring, I'm talking about fat coverage. I'm not talking about muscle here. And a lot of people will talk about condition and they'll mean muscle. But I don't. I mean, this is purely fat cover. So we're not even talking about top line here. Muscle is not fat, fat is not muscle. They are not the same thing. And then the next thing then is assessing your essential requirements. So again, this is the workload, temperament, and all of that that I was talking about. And I suppose you're probably all wondering, well, how do I actually calculate this? That's fantastic that you're telling me I need to take this into consideration, but how do I know what my calculations are? And the starting point for all of this is the National Research Council's Committee on Nutrient Requirements for Horses, the NRC. And they have basically published guidelines on how to calculate all these different requirements, all your calories, your protein requirements, everything. So they're your sort of go-to, because they put in they study the research, they look at all that has been going on and then formulate their guidelines. And if you're using any other source of information, any ration calculator, anything like that, you want to be thinking that you want to be checking that they are basing their information on a reputable source like the NRC. So it is. Literally what they do is they give you the calculations and you can sit down and do the maths, or you can use the ration calculator. Now it is worth remembering that these are based on guidelines, you know, and each horse is a little bit individual, but it gives you somewhere to start with. It gives you a number that you can say, right, I have this much forage that has this much calories in it, and I have this much concentrate, this much calories in it. I know I need roughly this amount, and I know I need roughly this amount because I'm able to look at both the maintenance needs. So this is what we're talking about, sort of temperament. Is it a low, average, or a high maintenance, stressy type animal? And you can see there that the 0.0303 goes up to 333 and then 363, and that's megacalories. So those factors will change just how many calories that the horse needs, and then obviously you multiply that up again by the type of exercise or the workload that you're in. So you're actually accounting for both of those, which is really great. It gives you just a bit more feel for where you are with regards to your numbers. And you just your proteins and amino acids, and you can but it's a little bit harder to determine if your guidelines are definitely meeting what your horse's needs are. And normally what we do is we just leave it in a bit of an excess, but there normally is naturally an excess in terms of protein, because it's not really the protein, crude protein. That's what maintenance CP here is talking about, is maintenance crude protein. We're not really talking about crude protein requirements. It's actually individual amino acids that we need when we're building our muscles. And at the moment, the only individual amino acid requirement that is known and stated in the NRC is for lysine. So it is a little bit more guesswork, but at least we still have figures. And it's something to start with. And the other thing that I suppose you consider then when you're talking about your protein are just you're supplying the system with the appropriate protein sources. So when we're thinking about our top line development here, so you want to make sure that you're given good quality protein, so that the horse's body can efficiently and effectively support the synthesis of muscle. Feeding alone will not create top line. Sorry, I don't have a magical supplement to sell you here, guys. It's not just, it's a bit like bodybuilders. You know, if they have a diet that's high in calories and high in protein, they're also on a strict fitness plan. And if they only ate the diet and didn't do the workout, they'd just be fat. So you have to, the same theory holds true here. So you're gonna have to put the work in order to get the dividends at the other end. And what we do here is we make sure that we have the building blocks there to support that creation and that muscle usage and that hard work. And I mentioned earlier that I said that body conditioning to me refers to fat coverage. Top line then to me refers to the muscles along the top of the horse, and it's not about fat coverage. So you won't have a strong, healthy horse with a beautiful top line if you don't work the muscles, even if you feed them a high protein, high quality protein diet. If you're feeding high quality protein and high quality calories, you'll probably just have a slightly fatter horse with perhaps a bit more fat covering over the upper part of the body. And a lot of people do confuse that for muscle. Might even, you know, pass under a judge's eye. They'd be like, there's a beautiful top line, but it's not. And we're here to actually have effective horses. And, you know, from a show jumping perspective, there's no point having a fat horse. You need a strong, healthy horse that can actually effectively use his body. So that's why I'm saying you have to you put the components of the nutrition in to support the work that you are doing at home. And really it's about ensuring that you have the correct amino acids and quantities of them there, so that the physical exercise that ensures muscle breakdown is enough to cover for new muscle fibers being synthesized. And the one thing I would say is, if you're not sure how to build top line, speak to your vet, your physio, your physiotherapist, or your trainer to devise a work plan to build those muscles. They're not easy to build. They do take work. They do take, time. And then at least when you have your ration plan in place, you're complementing that hard work that you're putting in with the appropriate diet to really see the results. So sorry, no quick fix. Everyone just turned off now. They're like, yeah, no, that's no good for us. That's not the answer that anyone wants to hear. So very quickly then, the next thing that you also need to think about is the NRC have amounts of vitamins and minerals that they give to that your horse needs. The one thing I did want to say on this one is not technically vitamins and minerals, well, it's minerals, is talking about electrolytes. So your sodium, potassium, and chloride. The NRC does actually provide guidelines for them, but it is quite difficult, again, a bit like the proteins, because it's not really a substantial amount of water loss that can be weighed when you're trying to figure out sweat loss from a horse. So it's estimated, but I find that a really good rule of thumb is to use between 1 and 4 teaspoons of table salt per day in your feed. And that's really depending on how hot it has been, or if your horse has been sweating excessively. Table salt, bought the cheap and cheerful stuff from the supermarket, just put it in your feed. Don't need to be buying that really nice, sweet, sugary salts from a lot of the feed companies. The other is just as handy, and you're cutting out the calories so that you're not worrying about messing up with your the rest of your feeding program. And then, as promised, because I'm sure none of you really want to be sitting down to do that mathematics, is some of your sources where you can start looking at building your own ration plans. So you can literally go to the NRC. I think they actually have a ration plan on it as well. And I think it's free to use. Some of the really good literature books that I've stuck up there, Nutrition of the Exercising Horse, and what's the other one? Clinical Nutrition is also very good. And then I found that other one, that Cavalier Ration Calculator. Not sure how good that one is. So there's a couple, if you want to screenshot that or write those down, or speak to your vet or speak to your nutritionist. But at least if you are using any of those calculators, even to get a rough idea for yourselves, do sense check them. Don't just assume they're correct. If it sounds crazy, it probably is. At least the NRC one should be based on their own requirements. So that's probably a good place to start as anywhere. So assuming that we have thought about our requirements and put numbers against them, then we now are taken back to our sources of feed and what we want to actually put together to actually meet all of these requirements. So as I said before, you're starting with your forage, whether that's pasture, hay, haylage, and you're thinking about your 2% body weight optimum rule of thumb if possible. And then if needs be, you're thinking about putting in your concentrates as a top up afterwards. Usually I would be saying, think about a vitamin and mineral balancer, even if you're not putting anything else in, just to balance out the deficiencies in the forage. And then you maybe are thinking about your additional sources of proteins, so that some of the balancers will also actually have some protein included in them, so just it's about finding the right product. There's loads of products. It's finding the right one that suits you. And then you're also starting to bring in, remember what I was saying about your temperament, any clinical issues, metabolic issues, and your home and competition environment. So you might be thinking, okay, my horse isn't a good eater of forage when they're away, so maybe going for a straight cereal based meal, I might actually then go to like an alfalfa based fiber so that I'm still getting additional fiber when I need it, things like that. So I just thought maybe if I just give two, they are examples that I've just made up out of my head here, of ways that I would maybe feed certain horses. So the first one that I sort of thought maybe, are we okay for time, Lisa? Sorry, I know I'm wittering on here. I sort of thought the first one I was thinking like, right, you sound like me with a stressy, excitable show jumper or something like this. A lot of them are prone to ulcers, and say you had the aim of going to jump in Dublin. So assuming that your horse is, at its ideal weight, it's now in medium work, and obviously the plan is to get to Dublin, but you have a number of qualifiers to go to. Those aren't always close at home, so you want to manage that situation as well. Being away from home, having lots of travel with a horse that's kind of ulcery, bit stressy. So my starting point there, as I said before, is your forage. So I'd be going ad lib forage, because they're in medium work, and trying to get as many calories out of the cheapest way of maintaining body weight that I can. So say I've tested my forage, so I know basically how many calories are in that. And we will assume, say, that it is deficient in a few essential vitamins and minerals. So my options then are on top of that. So say I need more energy, and I'm also thinking, right, I'm working on my top line here. So I want to make sure that I've got quality protein in there. So I could, first of all, look at a fortified feed. So that's one that has vitamin and minerals in it. I could pick one that maybe is low in sugar and starch because she's a bit stressy. She goes up a gear anyway when I don't want to add more sparkle. I don't need more sparkle. I just want calm. So I'm thinking maybe a fortified feed with added protein, something that has added lysine in it, maybe some probiotics built into it as well. That would be great as long as I'm feeding the recommended amounts of that. Because if you're not feeding the recommended amounts of that fortified feed, you're not feeding enough of the vitamin and minerals. So if I don't need all of those energy and calories, then what I might look at instead is using a balancer, to ensure basically that they get their vitamin and mineral hit. I might look at one that has a bit of added protein in it, and what I really think is really effective is I might look at actually adding in like an alfalfa chaff instead. That, especially if my horse is happy to eat it, will provide lots of additional calories, probably as much as the fortified feed. And it's also a really good management way for whenever you're dealing with traveling and ulcers. So you can be feeding a small amount, just a couple of 100 grams before they travel, so that there's something in the stomach when they're traveling. Half an hour before they're jumping, they get another little chaff feed, and then whenever they're coming home, you can give them another one. So the stomach is never actually empty. It's not about filling it up to the brim. It's just about providing that little mat. The great thing about alfalfa is it's also naturally antacid for the stomach. And if even when I'm at home, when I don't need to feed maybe so much because I'm not traveling, I'll still include a little bit in their daily feed, so that I can up and down it effectively. And if I was, say, down in Dublin, my mare decided she didn't like her hay, at least I can give her more fiber through the alfalfa during that short period of time. Or you could mix and match with some of those. So you might maybe even need the additional calories from your fortified feed. So you need all of those plus a little more. So you could even add in your chaff as a management tool as well as that. So there's lots of ways to skin the cat depending on what you need for your horse and what works for your environment and you're going to be. So maybe another example then would be I have a severely underweight horse. It's a per-doing horse. It's in rehabilitation due to injury, and it needs extra calories, but it's also being brought back into work slowly. So I don't want to overdo the sparkle. I don't want to be swinging off the end of a lead rope because, their head's blown from so much sugar and starch and calories going in. So for that horse, what I would do again, starting with the ad lib forage. This isn't going to maintain the horse's weight. I know it's going to need more, but get as much in as to start off with. It's the cheapest source. It's also the most natural source. Here, what I'd probably do was I've looked at the oils and fats as a source of it, you know, dense additional calories, so that the horse is more likely, and also oils and fats are low in sugar and starch. So you're still putting more calories in, but you're hopefully not giving that sugar rush and that sugar high. You know, if you think about children, when you feed them, you know, Smarties and stuff, they go, woohoo! So you're hopefully avoiding as much as that as possible, and whenever you're rehabbing, which just makes life a bit, hopefully a little bit more saner. But even if I were going to add in the oil, actually what I would think about then is, well, I have a horse here that's rehabbing, it needs to build up muscle. Sure, I might be doing walking over poles and all of this, but this is still actually potentially quite hard work for their muscles because they haven't been doing anything. So I might want to supplement that with a good quality protein. So instead of giving up using maybe linseed oil, I might swap that out for linseed meal. Because the meal has really good proteins within it as well. The only thing to remember, though, whenever you go to an oil or a oil-based feed, is you need to sort of allow that foregut, that small intestine, time to adapt. So it can take 3-4 weeks for the enzymes to be created to really effectively use that source of energy, because it is different from the sugar sources. So and it may not even be completely complete until 2 or 3 months. So again, this is something that you would reintroduce slowly. So you wouldn't just cut one and start the other. You'll do a gradual changeover. You'll be doing that with any feed changes. You know, you're looking at a nice gradual changeover so that there's no sudden changes. And then the other thing that you need to think about with that is to make sure that the vitamin and mineral profile is properly balanced to counteract any oxidative effects on the body using a high oil diet. So that would be my plan for those 2 examples. They're quite extreme. But hopefully the gist of, you start with your looking at your ad lib forage, or if you're on a diet, you maybe stick to the 1.5%, and then you build in all around it, thinking about your body condition, your workload, your temperament, and your environment. And as I said before, if it is a fitness program, you do need to review this regularly, because oftentimes you'll be, you know, peaking and then gradually coming back down. So, you know, just keep an eye on the weight and everything so that you're not going overweight or underweight, and you're feeding the horse that you have in front of you. And it's really by putting all of those together, all of those building blocks, that you're ensuring that the likes of your muscle development will be as efficient as possible. You know, making sure that your vitamin and mineral profile, those are really important, that the ratios are correct and all of them there in the right quantities. All of that helps with nutrient absorption, with, you know, with the synthesis within the body and things. So it's not about just feeding protein or just feeding one type of protein. It is putting all of those pieces together, because the healthier the digestive system is, the better it works. So the better it can support your fitness program, your muscle building program, that sort of thing. And it's sort of what I mentioned before about implement your plan sooner rather than later, not before Balmoral. You know, you need to be thinking, give yourself at least 3 to 4 weeks to change over from one feed to another, to implement a diet, and to, you know, see if it actually works, you know, because you might make this change and you may by the end of it go, actually I've taken out all the sparkle, I need to put a little bit back in, so I actually want to put maybe a little bit of sugar and starch back into it, you know. And you don't want to be doing that and going, oh my God, I have a qualifier today, da, da, da. You know. So this is why it's really good to have your plan in place and up and running, and then you just do small tweaks as your year goes on. and consistency, all I can say is key. And it's, yeah, small changes, being careful, monitoring, but having that floor plan set out at the start of the year, and then the adaptations are minor and it doesn't upset the digestive balance. So I thought I'd stop with some nice, very happy. So thanks for bearing with me there. That definitely went on longer than the minutes I was allotted. Lisa, do I hand you back control, or do you sort it? Can you take it back yourself?
No, we can leave you as you are. I think I can just unmute from here. Funny, I think I'll be heading off to our local rowan equestrian. I think alfalfa sounds like a good addition.
It's, for a lot of horses, really useful, especially for traveling, dealing with, like they say that between 70 and 90% of working horses have ulcers at some point. So it's almost better to assume they could be there, even if in small minors. And I always think, if you have an upset stomach or an upset digestive system, I don't care. Like, you're sitting there, you're always tight and tense, and you just don't perform as well as somebody who's, not had a big horrible feed that's upset their whole digestive system. So it's definitely worth playing around and getting it right to start off with.
Yeah, funny, for the last while I've been feeding Ease and Excel cubes, but my mare doesn't overly, like, she'll leave those to the end. And I'm now thinking, really, I probably should be on a balancer and then the alfalfa.
Well, the Ease and Excel is fortified. So it is a fortified feed. So, like, if you are feeding the recommended abouts, then you are, you don't need a balancer.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't even know if I'm feeding the record. That's what I'm now worried about. I'm going, my God, I haven't been. I mean, she looks okay, but I'm going, actually, are we actually short in vitamins and minerals? So I'm now considering gradually going back to balancer, and I think I'm gonna go alfalfa. Just sounds
well. It's good to try. The one thing I would say is, most of the diets I move people to are lower in sugar and starch and can be less appealing at the start to horses, because it's a bit like weaning children off, their favorite sweets. It is just a gradual thing, and that's again why I'm like, don't do this just before you have anything big planned, because obviously you don't want to throw them off form one day because they're like, I want my sweets and I'm not going to eat my food if I don't get them.
Yeah. And funny, the other thing that came straight into my head was, I wonder how many people out there have been buying there was top line conditioning cubes and expecting a miraculous top line.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of people will say, oh, he's put a lovely top line on, and like, yes, he's put a lovely layer of fat on, but no, it's not the same, sadly. I wish I could eat my way into a six-pack too, but I can't. So it's not, but it is.
Anybody, any questions for Charlene? You can either unmute or, oh, there's Dennis, for your question.
Thanks very much, Charlene. Very interesting. I'm just very interested in the title, the performance aspect, because I've got a horse who's a very picky eater, stressy, had ulcers a few years ago, and I'm trying to compete at meter 10 eventing, and he's 19 years old, and I know, well, a bit like Lisa, I've been on, he gets a conditioned mash, which he now will take so long as there's nothing else along with it. So he gets a wee bit of that separate, and then I'm feeding Ease and Excel nuts and performance balancer with that. But I'm now lately been supplementing it with so many of these B+, etc. A variety of supplements just to be sure. And I don't know, just to be on the safe side. But is there something sensible it should be doing rather than being, doing? He's not a well. He basically eats it all night, and most of it's away in the morning, but not at all usually. And I have to every day just have to empty it and ask for plenty of ponies to eat the rest of it.
No. Oh, it's hard, Dennis, whenever you get a fussy one that needs. And does he hold weight or does he need weight? Do you know?
He really needs weight. He just holds weight and no more. And that's only with the putting in the conditioned mash, which he does enjoy so long as it's on his own and don't put anything else with it.
Oh, God love him. The one thing I would say is, first of all, if you're feeding 3 or 4 different supplements, because I know a lot of the Bailey stuff also has, you can over supplement. So the likes of your selenium amount, there's a very small difference between your upper low, your toxicity limit and your okay limit. So just be careful if you're, especially because I know Baileys are quite a good, they do give you everything. So be careful you don't accidentally overfeed on supplements like that. If I were you, I would stick with, if you're on your Ease and Excel and he's eating that, I would stick with the recommended amounts of that rather than over supplementing with something else. Unless you're on a lower amount of the Ease and Excel and you wanted just to top up with one of the other balancers, that would be okay. But just to be aware, and the other thing is, if you put too much in, if you don't, it's not effective, you're wasting money because balancers are expensive. That's the other thing I always think. But
supplements are expensive as well, and but the Ease and Excel, he's not eating that much. He's not eating as much, but I do feel okay. He's only been out once, but he'll be out again hopefully at the weekend. He had a lot more energy this time with all, but I know I'm going overboard, and I would only be for a very short period, and I do cut them back and then build up again before an event or something, but I'd cut them off altogether. But he definitely had more energy than he had last summer when I thought maybe I need to drop him down a level because the speed's a bit much for him, whereas he was good, really good.
And was it the conditioning mash that you put in that has made the difference, do you think, over the winter?
No, nothing to do with condition match. It's to do with the performance balancer and these other supplements that have been given him, which I know I'm not happy with.
I would be thinking you want to get him on even if you pick the balancer that you think is working best for you, and maybe weed him off the Ease and Excel and either up the conditioning mash or things like your linseed meal. Really, really good for older horses. Really good. If he would eat it. Sometimes you can dress it with a little bit of molasses or something to encourage. But it would be cheaper in the long run, Dennis, to be feeding like a straight like that alongside your balancer because you're giving him everything he needs from that. And when you say he's working well in the balancer, that's the sort of thing you want to hear because you want to assume that he now has all the nutrients he needs for everything to work a little bit more effectively. So that's sort of the theory behind the balancer. It's not necessarily that it's putting more energy in, but it's making everything more efficient. So what you have put in works better. But if you're looking a wee bit extra calories, I would be looking at the linseed meal or the oil. Even if you could get a bit of oil in them.
I heard that.
Calorie dense.
Well, I always give them corn oil or linseed oil. Yeah.
But like, are you giving them one pump of it, or like?
Basically, yeah.
That's 30 mils. Like that's. With the older horses, you might be looking at moving them on. If you moved them onto the likes of the linseed meal, you could be looking at maybe up to 1 kilogram of that, and you're talking, proper calories there. You'd be looking at, 2 kilograms worth of a lot of conditioning mashes if you're feeding one of the linseed meal. I'm an advocate for the meal, by the way. So
no,
if you can find something.
It's very interesting. So it's the oil. I wasn't thinking of the oil and fat as you said about energy, which I'll have to look at that sort of thing. But and maybe cut back on the actual cubes themselves. Then really, I don't need them as I mix that along with a balancer, but maybe I could do a bit less of that.
Well, I would feed him the recommended amount of your balancer. So I would, because if it's a good reputable, if it's like the likes of Bailey's or Spillers, they'll be telling you the amount that you need to feed for the size of your horse. And if
Well, I'm giving them more than it. I'm giving them more.
maybe reduce it back a wee bit. And but again, I'm loath to, it's back to, you know, it's a delicate balance. I'm loath to say to do this, Dennis, a week before you go out to event, because you'll be cursing me up and down if he has a bad day then. But it
No,
is,
thanks very much.
no bother at all.
Thank you.
Nikki had just written in there what your opinion was on the Forage First products.
Is there anyone in particular
Isn't it?
that you're thinking about, Nikki?
So but I've just taken the hind shoes off one of the horses, and I think there's a version of it for feet and skin particularly. So it was just sort of, and again, it is quite expensive. He's getting Stam 30 as a balancer at the minute. So obviously you would take the Stam out and put that in, but it was just to get your kind of take on it before we would think about doing it.
I haven't. I'm trying to think what specifically is in them. Usually I find, you see, if someone says that it's going to be for hoof and all of that, it's a supplement on a supplement. If you were feeding a good quality balancer to start off with, you should be feeding enough for that horse's body to produce enough diet and things like that. If everything else is working effectively. There are times, yes, when you might want to say, right, I really specifically seem to be, my horse still is struggling with this, so I want to over supplement, so I'm going down that route. But again, it comes down to cost versus benefit. It might have a benefit, but it's not been proven to have a benefit, Nikki, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Don't know. What else were you moving him on to?
He's just getting some Termash and then balancer. And then he was getting oil because he was having problems. We had a wee issue with his bowels. So the oil was really to keep everything soft and moving. But yes, so I've taken his hind shoes off, and he has his hind feet are white. They were doing really, really well, and we're growing, and we could see lots of improvement. But then since he's gone into the field over the last sort of couple of weeks, and then it's been wet, and obviously there's more uneven ground and stones, and so I see a few wee crumbly bits, and I don't know whether to just ride it out or.
To be honest, that is nearly more. I had that problem one year, and I found even with a balanced diet, it's the damp getting into the hoof itself.
Yeah.
Have you tried any of the look, I was told he has to come in and let his feet dry out, otherwise you're just fighting a losing battle there, Nikki. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
I'd love to say feed this and that'll fix it, but the weather is against us right now, and I know the ground's so wet. If he could even get a bit of hard core somewhere to dry out that he could stand for a bit of every day, I found that was the only thing that really that, and well, I used Farrier's hoof, you know, the cream, but that's not me recommending anything from a nutrition point of view. I just found that worked for me.
Yeah, he's out in the field at night whenever it's dry enough. So I don't know whether that's the thing, but supposedly there's less sugar in the grass at night.
So that's a whole big thing to be thinking about with laminitis. And I suppose that's the other thing, is if your horse is prone to laminitis or something like that, he could there is the sometimes subclinical laminitis will affect or previous bouts of laminitis will affect the hoof quality and integrity, and that's an unfortunate, you know, you just have to maintain the diet for that to grow out. So yes, technically there should be less. So if you think about the sugar and starch and fructose amounts in grass increases as the sunlight hits it, so it's a photosynthesis. So in early morning, it should be at its lowest because it's been dark all night. Then during the day, when it's sunny, that increases during the day. So if you have a horse prone to laminitis or EMS or anything like that, you want to keep them in sort of in the latter parts of the day. Now, that being said, if you put them out at dusk, you know, they won't have had time for all that photosynthesis and all those sugars, starches, fructans to have dissipated.
Yeah.
So it will be higher at that point of the day. So even if you do it sort of early morning,
Mm-hmm.
the lunchtime is usually quite good, unless it is a cold, frosty night. If it has
Yeah.
dropped below sort of 4 degrees, that means that the sugars and everything won't dissipate during the night. They basically get locked in
Yeah.
to sit there until the sun and the temperature has had a couple of hours in the morning to dissipate and unfreeze everything basically. So that's why springtime, autumn time are really, really dangerous times for laminitic and, you know, acute onset of laminitis from pasture, because of that sort of sunny day, cold overnight, and then people forget and think, oh well, normally it's okay to put my pony out early in the morning because that's when there's less sugars and fructans, but they've actually stored all night, and then it's a disaster. So
Yeah.
that's sounds like you know what you're doing anyway, Nikki, but at least everyone now got my
Good.
other option talking about laminitis.
He's never had laminitis, or at one point he was tested for EMS and all those other things were going on. But I do notice when he does go on the grass that he is different, and he's lusus, and just everything's just better for him over the winter. But he loves his grass, so the happy medium I think at the minute is that he gets on in the evenings and then he goes into his hard stand during the day.
Yeah, no, I know it's management, and it's about also like a happy medium. You know, you can say this is what exactly the guidebook says, but like horses are not, you know, and life, you have to make things work, and your management plan has to work for you. But there is a lot of subclinical laminitis, you know, rolling around, and I would say just probably, if you've noticed it, it probably is just enough sugar and starch in the grasses, because you know what it's like. As I was saying, you know, our pasture land isn't native anymore, so it is higher sort of in those sort of sugar, fructan, starch qualities than some of our horses can cope with. Any tips for an ulcer prone horse that's overweight? Alfalfa? No. If you have like a management plan is really important there. So first of all, if you have an ulcer prone horse, obviously treat it veterinarily if you should first. Then it's about management. Personally, I don't really recommend a lot of supplements that way. You can get some supplements. My first go-to is actually managing it through the likes of, you know, your natural types of buffers through, and that's things like small amounts of alfalfa before you travel, before you ride. If you don't want to use alfalfa, you can use any, you know, get some grass nuts, soak them, you know, that sort of thing. Let them, anything that's fibers that can make a mat on the top of the stomach to prevent that splash up. Again, having a balanced diet with your right vitamins and minerals is also really useful, because that just makes sure that the lining of the stomach has everything it needs to be as sort of protected as it can be. You could think about adding in things like your linseed oils as well, because of the omega-3 and 6 ratios that can may help sort of with the glandular regions, mucus and stuff like that. So I always start with the get a wee fiber, but even if it's just having a hay net, even if you don't go down the route of alfalfa, even if you have a hay net sort of sitting there for them to, you know, pick at before they do anything or when they're on the box, just don't leave the stomach empty, because there is always stomach acid being pumped into the stomach and even if it's empty, and that just makes it more and more, you know, acidic. And horses don't produce saliva. So saliva is the other thing that sort of works as a natural antacid. They don't produce it naturally unless they're chewing. So they have to chew something. So you have to give them something to chew. And again, that's why forage is really good, because you can chew forage up to 3 times as much as you will a concentrated, you know, straight or a feed. So if you can get them even chewing more hay, you're putting more saliva in, which also, as well as the matting effect from the fiber, will help to neutralize stomach acid. Does that give you something to think about, Lorraine? Hopefully.
Yeah, well, we've done the linseed, we've done the stuff in the vet, but she's a really picky eater. And although, you know, I've been trying to feed her ad lib as much as possible, most of the time, most of the feed is just mixed in with the shavings. But she's definitely really girthy. But she's too fat.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a hard balance to strike between trying to slim her down a wee bit and keep the
It's
fat.
very hard.
Yeah,
Are you giving her enough forage? You might be
I am giving her as much forage as she can. There's never an empty stable. You know, she's never not got something.
Have you thought about soaking the hay, Lorraine? Is maybe your next step to try?
Yeah.
No, you do that?
No, actually, I don't do that, but maybe that's a good idea.
If you have hay and if she'll eat it, if you soak, even if you only soak one of your hay nets, you know, you're removing a lot of the sugars and starch, so you're keeping the fiber content, but you're taking the calories out. Steaming doesn't. I love steamed hay. The horses love steamed hay, but it actually doesn't take the calories out. You have to soak it.
Okay.
So that would be, if you're trying to lose weight but maintain the forage amount or the fiber amount. It's horrible, I know, but it's sort of got a impasse there.
Yeah, it is. It's really typical, you know, and I do, you know, she is too fat. I mean, my God, she's like a wee tank, but
I know
it's hard to cut the food out. It's down. I don't want to. I really don't want to. So
no, and you have to keep the you know, if you know, you're not winning anything by taking the hay away. It's just you can get it's up to 30% of the sugar, starch, or water soluble carbohydrates can be removed. By soaking the hay.
And would that work with haylage as well?
No, I wouldn't soak haylage because it'll not keep, and also because it's fermented rather than dried, and the whole balance, it just doesn't work as well. So it doesn't.
Because we've just had to move on to haylage because there's no hay in the country practically. So
well, I know. The other option you can do is I think is a top spec, do an edible straw. And you could actually mix in. Now be very careful when you're mixing this in, because too much straw can actually cause glandular ulcers. If it's by abrasion, but if I think it's quite a nice soft straw, so you could mix some of that into your haylage, and then it's, you know, reducing calories, keeping that bulk there, so she'll feel fuller.
Okay, yep, try that.
How long do you have to soak the hay for, Charlene, to decrease the sugar content?
A long piece of string. So there's loads of, like, if you look it up, it'll tell you everything from 30 minutes to 12 hours. I sort of say about 3 to 6 hours. At 6 hours, I find the hay is horrendous looking and and you've probably taken every little bit of nice tasting goodness out of it. So I normally say about 3 hours. And that should give you about 30% reductions. If you have warm water, you can reduce that down again, because you're basically, it's diffusion, not even osmosis, diffusion of the sugars out. The only thing is, coming into the warm weather, don't leave your soaked hay lying around for like a day before you feed it, or, you know, because once it's wet like that, it does and warms up a wee bit in the sunlight. It becomes a really nice breeding ground for bacteria. So don't leave it lying. But things like you could soak, you know, one hay net for the evening, and then let them pick at it all night, which is a really good way because they tend to be a little bit less keen on that hay. But if they've nothing else, and it also slows down their feeding then as well. So it normally works well that way.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think that's everybody. Thank you so much. That was great. I think my feeding regime is definitely going to gradually get that's for sure. I am going to put up your details, Charlene. So on the group, if anybody wants to avail any more of Charlene's services, sorry, I have a dog scratching the carpet beside me. I'll put up your website and your Facebook page so that people can get in contact with you. But no, that was fabulous. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much.